Welcome back to the channel. Doing another build here, and this time we're doing a car I've been eyeing for a long time. Modern classic, the E46 M3. Okay guys, so this is a car that I'll just tell you a little bit of backstory on this, and then we'll dive into the build. But I drove this car for a really short amount of time, way back, maybe 15, more years ago. Absolutely fell in love with it. At the time, the one I drove was an Imola Red convertible with an SMG transmission. But even then, and this was in kind of the mid to late 2000s, that car just felt special. Something about it was super unique. Fast forward to today, I've owned Porsches, multiple 911s, I've owned Land Rovers, Range Rovers. If you guys have been watching the channel, you know I do a lot of those builds. We have a BMW as a daily driver, it's an X5, we love that car. And I've always really wanted, in the back of my mind, to own an E46 M3 one day, but in more of the modern context when I have these builds that I do in the garage and this channel and everything else. So decided to purchase this one as part of a build. Gonna bring that to you on the channel. I'm super excited about that, just something new and different from a content perspective. I'm also gonna walk you through the entire build concept on this one from the very beginning. Most of the build series that I have on the channel, you can go back and watch those. They're kind of iterative. I didn't do like a big overview to start. So in this one, I really wanted to talk about what I purchased, where it is today in terms of what's been done to it, and then what all the plans are. So gonna go ahead and jump into that now. This is a 2002 BMW E46 M3. It's an Alpine white, has dove gray interior, has about 160,000 miles on it. Purchased the vehicle from someone in Virginia. It's one of these vehicles that's kind of been passed around through different enthusiast owners. So a lot of BMW or just performance sports car fanatics that have taken very good care of this car. They've really maintained it very well. The maintenance history on this thing is impeccable. Long and the short is, from a regular maintenance standpoint, everything's been done properly and at the right intervals. From a preventative maintenance standpoint, a lot of the items that do start to become an issue kind of in the mid 100,000s to approaching 200,000 have actually been proactively updated and replaced and changed. So there really should not be any major maintenance required on this car for at least another 50,000 miles outside of course, tire rotations and oil changes and filters. But I don't keep cars for 10 years, 5 years is pushing it. As you know, I build these cars. I tend to move them on to the next owner after a little while of the experience because I'm sort of about the journey. I like to experience different brands and different models. So I should be good for my period of ownership, I would think. Never say never. Maybe I will keep this car for 10 years because it's just that good. But nonetheless, that's a really great way to buy a car. Understand the maintenance history, try to get records around all that stuff. Talk to the previous owner. If you can, talk to the other previous owners behind them. That's what I did for this car. From a maintenance and preventative standpoint, I know the big question you're gonna have the big three been done? If you're not familiar with the E46, the big three are three really main elements of these cars that are problematic and just known to be issues long-term. In this case, all three of those have been done. The Vanos has been replaced with a rebuilt unit. The subframe has been reinforced, and there is evidence of that. So I can see where those aftermarket plates have been welded into the subframe, so we're good there. And the rod bearings have been replaced with new treated units and ARP bolts. So all three of those are non-issue. If you are shopping for an E46, I highly recommend you find one with the big three done, or if you haven't, just be sure that the purchase price takes into account the fact that each one of those is several $1,000s. And you can do it yourself, it's no big deal, but you don't want to pay a premium for a car that then requires $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $6,000 worth of items if it's got one or two or three of those big three not done. Okay, moving on to upgrades. What the previous owners have done, that's basically the last couple, so all this stuff has been done within the last 20 or 30,000 miles, which is great, is a huge list of stuff. So unlike the 911 build that I did, the 991.1, where I really had to go in and do a lot of performance updates like a DSC controller, a tune, exhaust, all kinds of things that were not just cosmetic, this car actually has a tremendous amount of performance upgrades. Previous owners of this were exotic car race track instructors. They took driving very seriously. They were very passionate enthusiasts. Drove this car a lot in the mountains in the Virginia, North Carolina area, did some track days with it. So it's really set up. So from top to bottom in sort of no particular order, the car does have an AFE Stage 2 Pro 5R intake on it. That said, I am going to consider the carbon CSL style intake for the vehicle. Obviously, I'm getting the performance through the AFE Stage 2 that's on here today. However, the sound and just the cabin experience and all the things you hear about with that carbon intake are something that really I like. I love kind of the visceral sound related elements of a build. So that's definitely on the list, although that is probably a little further out since this already does have a performance intake. The next item, which is a really big one, is this one has a Brembo GT big brake kit on the front and the rear. Fronts are F40, rear are Lotus. And so this is a very popular modification for E46 M3s. The brakes that come with the car are not great, to be honest. There's a lot of room for upgrade, and this system happens to be incredibly interchangeable so that you can mix and match a lot of different brake calipers and systems with this particular car. So that in itself is, like a retail $9,000 or so item. So that has already been done, which is great. The car has a performance clutch. So when the clutch was replaced, a performance unit was put in there just for a little bit more sensitivity and kind of overall performance. It also has a UUC short shift kit. The shift is pretty short, to be honest. All that said, there is a gentleman who makes kind of very bespoke, custom CNC'd shifters that some of the M3 E46 people here in my kind of circles in the Atlanta area have kind of turned me on to. Actually have a shifter in the works, custom made from that gentleman that should be here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and that will be part of the build. So nothing wrong with this shifter per se, but just the level of precision and kind of overall feel and tightness on this shifter, which I have tested in my friend's M3, is just second to none. It's like night and day. And I feel like for a manual car, the shifter is really important. So we'll touch on that when we go through the build, but it does have UUC short shift kit. It's got Hodgkin's front and rear adjustable sway bars. So that's obviously great from a handling perspective, and the adjustability is nice. It has Turner adjustable camber plates, which is, again, really nice to be able to dial in wheel fitment and adjust the camber as it relates to turning and cornering performance. Then on top of all that, it also has an Öhlins road and track coilover system to lower the vehicle, and then also that's fully adjustable as well. So the suspension on this thing is just completely dialed in. Those are all items that, frankly, if I had gone out and researched and thought about it, I probably would have settled on those items or similar items anyway. So we're leaving all that alone. That's already been done. The car also has a full Megan exhaust. So it's got a header, section 1, section 2, all that's been done front to back. Car does sound really good. I believe there is a resonator component to that for anti-rasp. Car does not have a whole lot of rasp. It has just a little bit of drone, certain RPMs, but it's easy enough to shift out of that. If it's bothersome on the highway, you can kind of pop into the next gear up or down and kind of avoid that very small, maybe 1,000 RPM band of drone. May just refine and tweak the exhaust over time. There are so many options for exhaust on these cars in terms of what sound you're looking for, but I wouldn't do any of that before I get into the CSL style intake, just to see how all that plays together. So we're gonna keep the Megan full exhaust, and it's a great system, and it's already on the car. It does have a touchscreen with Bluetooth and backup camera. I'll touch on the plan for that. I am gonna actually change that out, and I'll explain why. The car, as you can see here in front of me, is sitting on Apex EC7. These are 18 by 9.5 ET28 wheels. These are in a square setup. So obviously the square setup is really great for track driving. It's pretty good for mountain driving, cornering, things like that. Creates a unique look as well. You've got basically a rear wheel width on the front. So there's a lot of, kind of poke. It gives a very aggressive stance, especially from the front, which I like. All that said, I am gonna go up in wheel size. I'll talk about the upgrades there. So we are gonna switch these out, and I'll talk about my sort of thoughts behind why and what I'm gonna go with. The car has BAV sound speakers throughout. So it's got arguably one of the best sort of plug and play sound upgrade options, especially when you pair that with an aftermarket Bluetooth head unit like the one that's in here and the one I plan to swap it out for. And then last but not least, it's got a Mishimoto radiator, it's got high pressure Vanos lines, it's got an oil air separator. So those are like little, just more enthusiast-based upgrades that really solidify my assumption that the previous owners of this car really took the time, care, and effort to take care of the vehicle, put in the little touches around hoses and different radiators and more of the nuanced stuff that you wouldn't necessarily do if you weren't really into this vehicle and the way to really set it up for long-term success. So a lot of upgrades, like I said, on the car already. With that, let me jump into what we're gonna do as part of the build. Okay, so for the build, A lot of this is gonna be cosmetic. I'll just start there. Obviously, I just ran you through a really, really long list of performance-related upgrades that the previous owners have done to this car. So we're gonna be focusing on cosmetic upgrades. A lot of them are in the interior, which is actually a little new if you've watched my 993 build or you've watched the 991 build. If you watch the Land Rover builds, the Range Rover Classics, the D1 I did, most of those really didn't involve a ton on the interior. And so this one will be super interesting because I'm gonna get to explore new skill sets, sort of new techniques, new projects that frankly I haven't tackled before, and that actually excites me quite a bit on this one. So again, in no particular order, let me take you through what's planned. Alcantara flat bottom steering wheel. So the car currently has an aftermarket steering wheel. It's got a little bit of carbon fiber, it has a little bit of Alcantara, it's got M tricolor stitching. It's a great steering wheel, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but I really want something a little cleaner, a little more uniform in full Alcantara. I love the feel of that steering wheel. I know a lot of people have concerns about cleanliness. I keep my interiors like impeccable. I don't eat in the car or anything, especially something that's not a daily driver like this. So I don't really have concerns about the Alcantara getting, gross or faded or dirty or whatever. I do like the feel of it. I think it's something super unique and special when you're driving the car to have a full wheel like that. I also like the flat bottom look and the function of that. The wheel I'm looking at also has some ergonomic contouring to it around where your hands will go. And so I'm really excited about that one. And then to go with that, we're also gonna carry the Alcantara look with a tricolor M stitch, which the steering wheel will have, through the front dash, the center area of the shifter and those areas, and then the doors where the door handles are. And so all that will basically be matching Alcantara in a dark gray with the tricolor stitch. So I think that's gonna look really, really sharp. We are going to put in a more OEM-like Bluetooth unit. The head unit that's in here right now is great. It's actually a very popular one. It's kind of a larger screen. It pops up a little bit over, like you can tell it's aftermarket, obviously. It's got a backup camera and all that kind of stuff. So basically what we want to do is go to the Avant unit. I think it's the Avant 4. And that one basically looks like what would have been the upgrade originally to include nav and that kind of stuff back in 2002, but within it is an Android system that's got Apple CarPlay and high def screen and all the bells and whistles, Bluetooth, you name it. So we're gonna put that in just for a little more OEM plus look. I really, really want to make this thing as OEM plus as possible. So we're gonna make a slight tweak to the head unit. Okay, so next we're gonna go to wheels and tires, really important. Obviously this has the Apex wheels on it. Those are great for cornering, those are great for the track. They're super light. They're somewhat utilitarian. I mean, they have like kind of a brushed, almost like stainless steel finish. I wanted to go with something a little bit different, and I've wanted to own a set of more vintage looking BBS multi-piece wheels for a really long time. So if you've watched my other builds, the 993 I did the roof monoblock wheels. I felt like those are perfect for that car. On the 991 I did the Titan 7. To be fair, those are sort of BBS FI looking. That was basically sort of a copycat of that look, but I didn't feel like older style, like vintage, multi-piece BBS really fit the 991 build just because of how modern that was. So I feel like this 2002 is like the perfect car to get into a multi-piece BBS wheel. So I've decided to go with BBS LMs. We're gonna do that in a 19-inch. Okay, we're gonna do a staggered setup instead of the square setup just to get those, to fill the wheel wells perfectly, get the fitment as tight as possible. There are a couple of Instagram accounts that I follow, that I've been in touch with, that have been super helpful already in helping me dial in the offsets and camber adjustments and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that. It'll be a whole video on the wheels and tires, but we'll do those. We'll wrap them probably in Michelin PS4S. It's kind of my tire choice. They're just spectacular tires. We are going to the 19s in a staggered setup for BBS LM. Inside, in addition to the Alcantara bits I talked about, we are gonna go with Recaro Sportster CS seats in the front. These are very popular. They tend to, at least from what I understand, have this great blend between comfort and performance. And so we're gonna put those in with a whole episode on how to integrate those with factory OEM seat heaters is the goal, which mounts you should buy for different heights, things like that. And then we're gonna redo, retrim, redo basically the whole interior. So it's currently Dove Gray. A lot of these cars came with Dove Gray. It was very popular. It's pretty boring, just being honest. It's not very inspiring when you get in the car. It's clean, it's simple, it's very German, if that makes sense. So we're gonna change this over to black and cinnamon. Cinnamon was a BMW option. It's an incredibly popular, highly sought after BMW interior color, and I feel like the white and the cinnamon just gonna work so well together and really pop. And so I'm super excited about that. So the fronts, the CS seats will be wrapped in a custom seat cover. Calling it a seat cover really doesn't do it justice. This will be part of the episode, but there's a company overseas that makes highly custom seat covers where you basically disassemble the whole seat, put the cover in, reassemble the seat, and it's basically like it's been upholstered by them, but you get to do it here. So we're gonna do that. And then in the rears and on the door cards and these kinds of things, we're going to basically re-dye a lot of that. We're gonna do a DIY, we're re-dye some of the elements black, some of the elements cinnamon. So there'll be a whole episode on that, but I've been researching that a ton on how to do that yourself, and it seems very doable. So that'll be an interior retrim, that'll be a big project as well. So we talked about the CSL airbox, and that will require a tune when you do one of those. That's a big sound upgrade, a big performance upgrade. It's also a big expense. So that one's kind of a medium priority item. It won't necessarily be the first thing I do for sure, since the car already does have an air intake, but I'll be researching different options, bringing that stuff to the channel for you guys. Carbonius has a unit that's very popular, but there are other groups that make them. We are going to switch the side grills and the front kidney grill to a chrome look. Currently they're blacked out. The chrome, in my opinion, is just a little more OEM. The black looks great, to be clear. I think the previous owner did a nice job at picking that, but when we're gonna have the sort of polished lips of the BBS going on, I have removed the tint on these windows. As you guys see behind me, I actually did that the other day. This was like a 15% tint before. Now that that's all been removed, we're gonna go chrome with this and just tie everything together with kind of what it looked like from the factory. I like that look a little better. So on the paint work, it's in great shape. We are gonna paint correct and ceramic coat the car. As you can see, I've actually already started that process. Everything's taped off here. So we'll get that paint work dialed in, but not as much work to do there as a typical build for me. The previous owners appear to have done some paint correction, and I think there's a wax on here. They've done a really nice job in taking care of all that. We are going to C4 all the trim, G-Technic C4 trim restore. It's actually in great shape. It's been replaced somewhat recently, so we'll just kind of polish all that up. We'll coat the wheels, obviously the BBSs. We are gonna do accent seat belts in a accent color, TBD. I will save that as a surprise. And that's gonna match the brake calipers, which we're going to refinish, the Brembos, in that same accent color, and it will also match the center caps on the BBS wheels. So we're gonna have kind of a three-way color tie-in. As you know, if you've watched my other build series, I always try to bring in some kind of color accent that really works well with the interior leather color and the exterior body color to kind of make it unique, make it pop, and make it special. It's become a bit of a signature, I guess, on these builds, so we're gonna do that. And then I mentioned the shifter, so that is technically the Auto Solutions Autocross Madman shifter is the name of that unit that the gentleman makes. We're gonna put that in, and last but not least, we are gonna go with some brushed aluminum Performance M style custom CNC'd pedals for the gas pedal, brake pedal, clutch. So that's the overall build, at least as it stands now. As I said, wanted to give you guys an overview, talk about the latest purchase, kind of get you amped for the build series, and for the first time, give you a bit of a preview and a window into where I want to take this build. So if all that sounds exciting and you don't already subscribe to the channel, would really appreciate it if you do. That way you can stay up to speed with all the builds that I'm doing. Specifically this one, if BMW is your thing and this is how you found the video. Please check me out on Instagram. Handle is at 911 South. That's 911 South, all phonetic, all spelled out. And yeah, look forward to catching you guys on many future episodes as I get this one dialed in, our latest project here in the garage.